All right, everybody. Gerald, thanks for joining. Good to see you. Hopefully, you have some students in there with you. Really excited to have Zac Wanzek on today. Obviously, the president of CFA Society of Minnesota. Sean, thanks for hopping on. Really, we want to just get in front of you guys, on a busy week. Presentations coming up on Thursday. We're excited to get this, next level of competition going and see what the students have prepared and get the competition onto the next round. So, really, I think without further ado, want to introduce Zac, Chief Investment Officer of Bell Bank, and really want to, have a conversation with him today. One, a little bit about, who he is, his career, maybe a little bit about being the president of CFA Society in Minnesota. But even more importantly, the topic of the conversation today is talking a little bit about what does the value of the charter mean to him. You guys have heard it from me talking about, what it's done for my career and where I am now, a little bit of a don't forget where you came from kind of thing. But to hear from Zac, somebody who's kind of made a name for himself up in the Fargo area and even in the Twin Cities area, being, 3 or 4 hours away, I think it'd be great to hear from him. So, Zac, I know you have some, thoughts prepared, but, if you could go through just a little bit of your background, maybe a little bit more emphasis on, the time of your life that you did get the charter and, sprinkled in getting the CPA during that time too, I think would be an interesting kind of side note because we hear a lot of questions, CPA versus CFA and what that means and how you could add a little bit of color to that. So I'll leave it there, kind of vague for the first question, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for joining. So I think just real quickly, what I'd like to do is start with what I do today at Bell Bank and kind of, what my career has kind of evolved into, and then I'll backtrack and kind of cover, how we got there. But Bell Bank is one of the 10th largest privately held banks in the country, and we've got a operating subsidiary called Bell Wealth Management Division, which is our investment arm of our bank. And so I'm the chief investment officer. We have about 70 employees across our wealth management and investment management divisions, and we have three primary operating segments within wealth management. So we cover your private client wealth management, kind of financial planning, as you all may know it. We have a retirement plan services division where we administer 401(k) plans on behalf of corporate sponsors. And then we've got our institutional investment management division where we are managing individual equity, fixed income, and alternative asset strategies on behalf of institutional clients, foundations, endowments, universities, insurance companies, other banks, etc. So my role as chief investment officer, I oversee the investment committee. I serve as chair of our investment committee and obviously have a hand operating each of those underlying kind of three segments of our business. We've got about 14 billion in assets under management at our organization. So we work with clients from your small $25,000, IRA that's saving for long-term retirement all the way up to a multi-billion dollar insurance company. Um, I like to explain my path towards being chief investment officer at Bell as kind of started as an accountant, and now I'm a reformed accountant. So when I went to school at the University of North Dakota, I graduated with degrees in both finance and accounting. And for me, I decided to pursue the public accounting route right out of college. So got a job with Eide Bailly in Fargo, where I was doing audit and financial statement examinations for companies of all different types. I was traveling all around North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana. And then later on, when I decided to join our insurance services group, I ended up traveling kind of all over the country with that. But to make a long story somewhat short, when I was up at UND, I was involved in the Student Managed Investment Fund, Kurt, which I know a lot of the universities we work with have similar formats of the Bison Fund, for example, in Fargo here at the North Dakota State University. And I was doing like consumer discretionary sector individual stock analysis in college, and I really liked it. At the time, I was working on an analysis of MGM casinos when I was in college. And this was, to date myself a little bit, leading right into the great financial crisis and the Great Recession of 2008. MGM casinos, I had a buy recommendation at the Student Managed Investment Fund. We had about an $80 price target on it. the fund, went along with my recommendation. We ended up acquiring MGM for the fund at around $60 a share. It moved up to closer to our $80 price target. We actually sold and exited the position. I graduated in the fall of 2008, and this story is kind of funny to me because I remember in March of 2009, I had just started working with Eide Bailly, and I had saved up a little money and opened a TD Ameritrade account. And I went out one day and checked, and MGM Casino was trading at $1.50 a share. And so for me, I remember being startled because just, 9 months prior to that, we had an analysis doing a discounted cash flow that said it was worth $80 a share. And so, I went out and put every cent I had into MGM casinos at $1.50 a share. And it just turns out that when I was doing this, it was pretty much the bottom of the market. So I could have picked any stock literally in the market and it would have looked like a home run, 6 months later. So rather be lucky than smart any day, right, Kurt? But I say all of that to say that, as I was continuing to progress my career in public accounting, I was building a great foundation for financial statement analysis, right? Understanding how financial statements work, how footnote disclosures are crafted and created and written. But I found myself being pulled more towards my passion, which was investment management. I really wanted to make a change. I really wanted to get into the investment industry, but at this point, I was 4 years into a career in public accounting. I had been, received multiple promotions already at this point and was kind of having this debate about, hey, do I want to stay with where I'm at? I've already made good progress. I've cultivated good relationships in this firm that I'm working at, and there's this path to the partnership, which is kind of where everybody wants to go when you join public accounting. You want to become a partner. But I ultimately chose to follow my gut and kind of make a bold move and transition my career from public accounting into investment management. I found a role here actually at Bell Bank at the time, working in the investment team. And the big decision that I had to make at that time was how do I ensure that this change in career path from accounting to the investment industry isn't some big step backwards for me. I had already went to work and done all the work to get my CPA. The work there was paying off and getting promotions, and I was starting to kind of climb the ladder in the firm I was at. And I said, if I go and, is all of my work towards getting the CPA going to be for none now that I switch careers and I kind of drop back to the bottom of the totem pole? So what can I do to somewhat alleviate that concern? And so I started looking in investment industry related designations and what would be the best possible solution for that problem. It was pretty quickly apparent that the CFA was known as the gold standard, right, in the investment industry. And I kept reading more about how, if you're a lawyer, you get your law degree. If you're a doctor, you get your MD. If you're an accountant, you get your CPA. If you're in the investment industry, you want an equivalent status, you get your CFA. So, I right when I took my job at Bell Bank, I joined the CFA program and started working on the curriculum. I would say that that was probably the best decision I ever made, just because of the fact that it did allow me to take what was a really solid foundation and build a brick house on top of it, right? The CPA was the foundation. It gave me that analytical skill set that I needed, and the house is where I wanted to live, right? And the CFA was really the bricks and stones and windows and doors that created what is my career today. So, really helped ease that transition and helped mitigate that concept of trying to, go backwards before going forwards, and really shallowed the learning curve moving from accounting to the investment industry.
Zach, I want to kind of continue and talk a little bit more about, your path along the CFA to where you are now. But maybe talk to me a little bit about that career switch, decision that you made, right? A little bit of like a pros and cons list, things that you went through, like people you consulted. Maybe talk a little bit about that because a lot of the students that are going through this, process, they're going to be entering their first job. And
Mhm.
maybe it's something that they love to do, or maybe they kind of find out that it's not something that they, get up every day and are excited to do. So to hear from you, somebody who made that career shift might be a helpful insight in how you did that.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest mistake that young professionals and students looking to join the professional career make is that they think they need to know before they pursue whatever that first job is, right? And the reality of it is, it's very hard to know what you really like to do, what you're really passionate about before you've actually gone out and done some of this stuff, right? So for me, the accounting job I thought was going to be my dream job, right? I really did. It was a great firm. It paid me well. It allowed me the ability to travel all over the country when I was younger and before I was married with kids. So it gave me a lot of the things that I thought I was looking for. And ultimately, even when you do something like go down the accounting path, for example, you're given a choice before you even leave school. Well, do you want to be an audit or tax? And I remember even with that question, I kept asking myself, well, I don't really know. And I know I would always have accounting students come up to me and say, well, what should I do? Should I do accounting or should I do audit or should I do tax? And my answer is always, you got to go try both before you really know which path it is that you like. And then from there, you're going to need to take a year or two to really grind it out in that path to determine if that is what you want to do, for the next 5 years. So my advice would be don't be overly concerned that the first step is the last step, right? It's just a step, and you need to take multiple steps to really get to where you want to be from a professional perspective. And so for me, going into accounting and spending time doing something that, I always tell people that I was spending more time trading options and stocks and doing audit work papers. And I was like, I better make a move before someone decides to move me. And so I think that, as you get into your working career and your profession, it'll become pretty apparent if you're not in love with what you're doing. And that's when you should really start to maybe look around and send out some feelers, but just know that it's never too late to make a change. I was 5 years in, and really, I think it was only beneficial for my career to go out, cut my teeth in the accounting world, get that foundation, make the network that I made, and then leverage what I learned to take the next step forward rather than viewing it as a step backwards.
And that's a really good point, that you talk about is you're not stuck in whatever you do, right? That stuck is a decision that you're making to stay there. But if you're waking up and you're thinking, that this is not where my passion is, right? It's a long career and you might as well make
Mhm.
it a little fun. Maybe Zach, as you kind of continued, right? We call it like, you went through and passed CFA, right? Which is kind of just a short sentence to talk about a really long process
Mhm.
that you went through to do that. Maybe just like for a fun little break in the action, maybe share a little bit of your, kind of war stories or just maybe how you got through the CFA program,
Yeah.
some of your things, just any anecdotes there before we kind of dive into a little bit about what the charter is now, what it means to you.
Yeah, yeah, and what I'll say for that is everybody knows what works for them when it comes to studying and, whether you're in school or you're doing a professional, post-education designation of some type. Everybody has a model that works for them. And I was able to really start to understand that in taking my CPA, in terms of like what study hours worked for me or what was the methodology to get through it. But ultimately, I'm a big believer in incentive, and I will say this first and foremost. The firms I worked for had bonuses tied to achieving and getting these tests passed, right? So that to me was a big motivator to get up, get into the office early and study and get these tests done because I was looking for monetary compensation as well as what I knew would ultimately be some really nice, resume builders and things of that nature. But for me, I was very kind of cognizant of the fact that if this the CFA program, it takes 3 to 5 years on average, I'll say, and it's a lot of studying, it's a lot of, personal time sacrificed. And so my whole goal was to try to minimize the amount of personal time that I had to sacrifice as much as possible. And the way I did that was I built my study program into my workday. So when I was done and went home at the end of a day, my goal was to be done, meaning I'm not going to open my books and study when I'm done with dinner, right, as my last hour of the night. Like I am done with work and studying when I go home. And so throughout the entire 2.5 years that I was taking my CFA exams, I would work 8 to 5, but I would get in before 7, and from 7 to 8, I had 1 hour studying. And then I would put the books away and I would work from 8 to lunch. I would bring a lunch every day. And from noon to 1, I would eat lunch at my desk and I would study for another hour. And then at 5 p.m., I would turn all work off. And from 5 to at least 6, sometimes it would go, to 7. I'd get 2 hours at the end of the day, but I would have a minimum, Kurt, of 3 hours of studying done every day by the time I left the office. Yes, my work day went now from 7 to 6. But when I went home at 6 or 6:30, I was done for the day, right? And I could, maybe have a glass of wine with dinner and just relax for the night. And I really think that helped keep a lot of the burnout from building up. I see way too many students and candidates in the CFA program that are trying to cram everything into that last 3 months, or they're saying, I'm going to spend a whole weekend, 2 weekends a month, and I'm going to take the whole weekend and study. I think those little 1 hour increments throughout the course of a workday make it feel like a long workday. It worked for me, I think, Kurt, because I was coming from public accounting where we were expected at that time to work 50, 60 hours a week anyways. And so when I switched careers, I no longer had that expectation, but my body was already somewhat wired for it. So I somewhat kind of substituted the work hours I was doing in public accounting for study hours on the CFA program. And it worked well for me, but I think just my recommendation advice would be, lean into what works well for the type of person in your schedule.
Zach, that's great. I think like the thing that you're highlighting is not, these crazy, study hacks or, something along the lines of like, I had all these great tools, I had this, awesome, the way that I could just get information in my brain in a quick way possible. Like what you're talking about was just consistency and being like, every day being good, not just sometimes being great. And I think a lot of people will highlight that to you. And I think that's a big thing for the students to kind of learn about is a lot of the charter holders now will talk about just the consistency, right? Because it's level one, level two, level three, and nobody wants you, to pass this as much as you do. And it's a lot of self-motivation that goes into it. It's not somebody else pushing you, but the
Mhm.
monetary compensation definitely helps put
Oh,
a little bit of push behind you.
absolutely. And I mean, and not everybody is fortunate to have either a job or an employer that's going to support them that same way, right? But that too can be motivation because now, just like when I was in college and I decided that I wanted to get a job in public accounting and get my CPA right away, it was because I had student loans to pay off. And I knew if
Mhm.
I got my CPA, I would get a higher compensation and I could more quickly get rid of that student loan debt and get on with life, right? And so
Right?
that might be a motivator for someone who doesn't yet have their dream job in the financial services industry and it's not getting their CFA studies subsidized, right? They have to pay for it on their own. Use that as motivation to say, hey, I'm going to go get that job and I'm going to get rid of the debt that I had to take on to get the CFA charter.
Absolutely. And part of a interview question that you can ask that potential employer, do you support the CFA? Is that something
Yep,
that, we could go through and
absolutely.
work towards together? Great point,
Absolutely.
Zach. Zach, maybe let's fast forward, skip a few years, right? Work through, got your CFA charter, you know, really was working on building your career. Maybe talk to me a little bit about that point, between earning the charter and maybe the point that we are now, that you saw the benefit of the charter, whether it
Mhm.
was, being younger in your career, it was being in a new industry, it was talking to different people. Maybe give me a few examples of the benefits there.
Yeah, and there's so many, right, Kurt? I mean, I think there's benefits in so many different ways in your personal knowledge base, skill set, competence, right? I think the confidence that it gives you just to speak the language and to be able to, converse with other industry folks. Because if you're coming from an industry, it doesn't even have to be accounting like mine, which is very closely related, but you might decide you want to be, you're maybe somebody who was going to go to med school and you got into biotech companies and you decided you wanted to become an investment professional. It really gives you that competence, that confidence to be able to step into this world and be really eloquent about how you do so. So I think that's a big thing. What I've seen and noticed too, being in the Midwest my whole life, right, is there's a parochialism just around the country in terms of how they view investment professionals who might be, based in the Midwest versus the coastal cities like, Los Angeles or New York. And I think having a designation like the CFA is a credibility enhancer to external parties that, maybe just for yourself personally or your firm, right? When I joined Bell Bank, we only had two or three CFA charter holders in the bank. And so by me getting it, now we have four. And now we've hired a team of charter holders here. We have the largest team of CFA charter holders in the state. And so inherently that enhances the optics of our organization to third parties if we're trying to, bring capital in or raise money with clients, things like that. Um, but but a specific example, Kurt, when I joined Bell and I started working under our former chief investment officer, Greg Sweeney, and just a quick, piece of information, we have a large fixed income active management business here at Bell Bank. And so we manage a lot of bond portfolios on behalf of clients. And Greg Sweeney, our former chief investment officer, has been a bond guy his whole life. And so he hired me, and really what my first role was working as a credit analyst for him. We manage credit portfolios, and so the bonds we invest in have the risk of default. We have to make sure that we buy bonds that don't default. And what blew me away was, even in, let's say, that first year or that second year, when I would get assigned a credit to analyze, and I would come back to my boss with my analysis, he was blown away at my ability to cut through the minutia of a financial statement and pull out what matters, right? Even things like digging into the footnote disclosures, where you get that one piece of information that just doesn't stand out to you, right on the top at the financial statement level. And he said, "Man, your ability to underwrite and analyze credits is better than anyone I've ever seen." And the only way you could explain that was my foundation in the accounting world, right? And then the CFA program, you add that on, where now I start to understand how bonds work, how duration and convexity and capital structure positioning matters when it comes to defaults and recovery rates and these things. So the ability to step in and bring a perspective that maybe only someone with a CPA and a CFA could have had, right? And add value for our organization in a really quick way, I think is a cool real world example of how, combining my skill set from my prior world with the knowledge I attained getting the CFA charter, resulted in immediate impact.
That's huge, and a good feeling, right? To see that, and you didn't just put those hours in for nothing, right? You get to see the immediate impact of, hey, this
Yep.
designation actually helped me in the day-to-day life.
And again, a confidence enhancer, right? You're in a new industry, and now you have your boss telling you how impressed he is with the work you're doing.
Mhm.
And so, it all kind of percolates up together.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zach, maybe let's, fast forward a little bit again and bring it a little bit more modern, times of where we're at right now. You have been involved with the CFA board for quite some time and, now president of the CFA Society of Minnesota. Maybe talk to me a little bit about, your willingness to give back and, reason for doing that and, what you've really seen as kind of your impact moving forward.
I'm just very passionate about ensuring that we, and when I say we, I mean regional investment professionals, are treated with the same respect as anybody else, right? And I think that one thing that really irked me as we here at Bell were building out and growing this organization over the last 10 years was how hard it was to attract young talent to our organizations, right? Because if you grow up in Fargo and you're the smartest person in your class and you've got full ride scholarship offers to your pick of the litter when it comes to universities, the likelihood that you're going to stay in Fargo and take that first job, or that you feel that that is even adequate, is very low. I mean, we would just see over and over again the brightest minds, leaving our area to go get jobs. And as an employer and someone who's trying to build a high quality team and really, really focused on ensuring that we've got good people, it was frustrating for me. And I'm sitting at an organization again, and I said this at the beginning of the call. We manage 14 billion in assets. We're one of the largest privately held organizations in the country. We have a lot to offer, but if you can't get kids, young professionals in the door to tell that story, it still makes it very hard. So I just grew frustrated over the years of seeing and feeling this. And I thought, one way to maybe help is to get involved the CFA Society. We have 1,400 members. We've got a large voice. It's a very well-respected organization. And I thought maybe if I get involved and I continue to grow my center of influence and my network and expand it into the Twin Cities area and beyond, maybe there's more good we can do. a great example at being involved with the board of CFA Minnesota is for the last several years, I've been invited to the Society Leadership Conference. Shannon and myself have gone, past presidents and vice presidents go, and this is where all of the global heads of the CFA societies all over the world get together once a year and brainstorm and talk about initiatives, moving forward. How can societies benefit one another? How can we make bigger impact in our respective regions? And if you can imagine, Kurt, for somebody who's either new to the industry or been in the industry for many, many years, it's really beneficial to be in a room with all of the most, powerful people from across the CFA and investment industry. Um, so, so the opportunity that it has provided and the exposure that it gives us is pretty meaningful as well.
And Zach, what do you kind of see as the maybe biggest focus or maybe like initiatives that maybe some of the new students kind of going through the CFA program, the CFA tests, maybe things that they're going to encounter kind of when they come out into the industry? Um, what are they going to be tasked with, and maybe what do you want to see as kind of maybe your lasting legacy after are no longer president of CFA Society of Minnesota?
Well, I mean, one thing, Kurt, you know this, you sit very close to this, but be ready for change, right? I mean, look at the CFA program itself. When I took the exam, we were in person in one big room at the Excel Energy Center with paper and pencil and a calculator. And today, they're all done at the computer, right? Now we've got practical learning modules where we're bringing in things like coding and working through systems like Python, and obviously over time the curriculum will continue to embed more AI related topics, right? So just I think it's one of the beauties of our profession is we need to be committed to lifelong learning to stay competitive in this industry because change is just so prevalent and is so impactful in our industry. And it's going to be the same thing, for you might get involved in the CFA program now, and in a couple of years, if you're still going through it, you might see change. You have to be ready for that change because it's part of our industry. It's the nature of the beast, and you have to be willing to accept change too. I think that's super beneficial from a career perspective and for young students that are coming into this industry. Nothing's going to be static. And so I think just kind of having a preparedness for that aspect alone will set you up for resilience kind of and long-term success as you're thinking about both the CFA charter and our industry in general.
Yeah. And Zach, maybe the closing comments I'll share. Nobody got on the Zoom to hear me talk. But it's the point that you talked about of, the CFA, just the charter really setting you up for critical thinking skills and the ability to, handle those changes, right? And so, if you can
Hmm.
think through problems and, not just feed them into, a computer and hope you get an answer, right? But being able to think through that, that's where you're going to add value. That's where you get paid by your company, and the value that you add is putting thought into something. So,
Yeah.
Zach, I promised you 30 minutes. We're on 29. But Gerald or Sean, I'll turn it over to you guys. Any questions for Zach while we have him? And then maybe I'll turn it to Shannon and Megan if any
And
closing comments
and
at the
and
end.
Kurt, maybe I'll
Yeah.
just end with one thought too. As focused as this topic is, and as our research challenge is on the CFA, the technical skills, right, that it develops and brings, what I encourage students to focus maybe equally as important on is the soft skills, right? The communication skills, the networking skills, the interpersonal skills. I think in our industry, there's a lot of smart people, and there's a lot of people who can sit at, a very complex Excel-driven mathematical model and kill it. But the people who really excel and who really migrate to the top of their organizations are the ones that have both the soft skills and the technical skills. And I think that it's pretty easy, especially when you're young and you're so focused on things like getting your CPA or your CFA, to focus only on the technical skills. But you have to push yourself. And that's where the CFA Society really comes in. We've got networking opportunities, we've got volunteering opportunities, we've got events all the time that can push you outside of your comfort zone, that can force you to work on those interpersonal skills, those communication skills, those leadership skills. But if you're getting involved volunteering with our organization, so please, push yourself not only on the, academic and book studies, but on the interpersonal and the soft skills as well. So my final piece of advice, Kurt, before I turn it over for any questions.
Very, very good point. Yeah, the soft skills can bring you to that next level. That's great. Sean, Gerald, anything for Zach right now?
Hello,
Hey, Sean.
my name's Sean Stumpf. I'm a assistant professor of practice and finance at NDSU. My stake in this, we're a CFA affiliated university. I'm not a CFA myself. I didn't have a mentor. I graduated, initially with accounting and finance. I did lean more towards a CFA, but I didn't have anyone, I guess, in my sphere. So I went the other route. I got a CPA and a number of different credentials. So
Mhm.
I'm somewhat CFA adjacent. I'm here learning about the gaps that I have to try and help students to prepare for that. We do have a CFA on the faculty here, but he's not always around, and people need different perspectives. One thing that was interesting to me is the different pathways that the CFA
Mhm.
allows now. So they've really, I guess, you've got the private equity, the portfolio management, and the wealth management. Is that kind of where it's at?
Mm.
So you know, trying to, I guess, realign the curriculum in those areas is a challenge for me. And I don't know if you've seen other universities or other programs when the CFA Institute pivoted that way with that broad skill set, and even the soft skills, how universities can maybe align better with those programs. We're not going to be able to get the students ready to cram for the exam, but all those other things you talked about that they need, we can help with more.
Mhm.
So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Shannon, maybe you could jump in here on the pathways just a little bit, and then I'd be happy to follow up after that as well, Sean, too.
Yes, and we can also have a side conversation, Sean, too. But the portfolio management still does remain the most popular pathway for
Which would be
students.
your traditional, Sean, kind of the traditional
Correct.
path for the CFA. So if they never did anything, the portfolio management path was the CFA prior to this new enhancement.
Yes, and something so and then it's so that's the most popular. I think it's wealth management and then private equity is the other kind of the order in which people are showing interest. Um, I can tell you that a change they made this year was when you do the practical learning modules, you can pursue the path you want, but you do have access to those other modules. So if you are working on the studying for the level 3 charter, um, you still can access that information and you can still go through the modules while still maybe staying in the portfolio module if you want. So that is an enhancement that they did make to candidates so they could experience all three but choose the path that they're most interested in.
Yeah,
And
good question.
I can give if you want to reach out to me separately, we can kind of go more into detail about um, how they're supporting universities too.
Sean, are you the and are you the faculty advisor that would be tasked with like reporting into the CFA Institute around the curriculum and things to maintain that university affiliation status?
I'm an assistant to some of those things. There's just so much work
Okay.
to do. So I think historically
Yeah.
it was Dr. Fariz Husseinov, but
Yep.
now it's Dr. Ali Jaffrey. And we both just came in this last fall.
Hmm.
So I'm helping out. We have the Bison Fund, which is kind of our investment CFA initiative. So I'm helping out with some of the heavy lifting with some changes that we're making in the fund. And there's also
Hmm.
some changes in the curriculum we're making. So I'm kind of on the
Okay.
side here, and to be the most helpful, I want to be a little bit more informed on this
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah, and Shannon and I can connect you. We actually just recently connected a Minnesota university that was going to be. They've been an affiliate for a number of years, and they had some turnover in staff, and so they stopped reporting into the institute. And essentially,
Mm.
the institute emailed us to tell us they were going to be revoking their affiliation status. So we connected them. They are now going through getting everything caught back up so they don't lose their affiliation status. So we can connect you with that same person who will have all those resources that you would need in terms of like looking at the curriculum, ensuring that you remain aligned. And then I think they may have some really good, potentially practical advice around the pathways as well and how to think about incorporating, considerations at the very least around the pathways. But I would say generally, And to Shannon's point, in the absence of wanting to do anything specific for private equity, for example, right? Like focus on that portfolio management pathway because that is far and away still the most popular and the one that, I think over 70% of CFA candidates are pursuing at this time. So the other pathways have not had significant or broad adoption yet. It doesn't mean they won't, and that you shouldn't be thinking about that. But Sean, too, I just wanted to mention, I was unable to join on the call on Friday that Dr. Joffrey set up.
Yeah.
I had something come up last minute unexpectedly, but I would love to connect with you
Yeah.
too. I was really happy to see that email come through and some of the stuff that you all are working on. And I think of the last 12 years, I was the mentor for the Bison Fund team in the Research Challenge, probably 7 or 8 of the years. And then I've sat on the faculty advisory board to the Bison Fund for a number of years. So I've been very involved over the years, and I think it would be great to get to meet both you and Dr. Joffrey as well. So
Yeah, no worries on that. We know, I mean, the whole advisory board is very busy, and getting everyone's schedules aligned is it's almost like waiting for an eclipse sometimes. So that's
mhm,
totally fine. We can connect at a different time.
sure.
I want to leave the floor here. I don't know if Gerald has any questions as well.
Yes, but I do have questions. Sorry, I was driving so most of the time. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, so we have a finance major just approved at SDSU, and I've been thinking of actually pursuing the CFA Institute partnership with, and also getting approved. And so, what does it require? In the past, I looked into it, but I kind of did not keep up with the requirements. Where do I find the information? How should we go ahead with this CFA partnership university program?
Yes. Why don't you reach out to me through email, Gerald, and I can get you that information. Um, because the other thing that helps is to have a champion from the society also letting the institute know. So we would be happy to serve as that for you too. But send me an email and I can get all the information to you that you need.
Sounds good. Thank you, Shannon.
Awesome.
Which university is Gerald with?
SDSU.
Oh, got it.
South
Awesome.
Dakota. Yep.
Awesome. Great.
Awesome. Megan, Shannon, anything in closing? Questions?
Just thank you, Zach. We really appreciated your time and your
Of
story.
course.
Very helpful, I think, for
Yeah.
students to hear.
Yeah. I'd reiterate the same. Zach, thank you so much for going through that. We appreciate it. We're excited to, stay up to date and, give everybody the update on Thursday on the winning school. So more to
Yeah.
more to come on that. But again, Zach, thank you.
No, thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure and excited to tune in and watch the presentation round of the research challenge. So it should be exciting and good stuff. The students always bring their best, that's for sure.
That they do. That they do. All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
Kurt.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.